It's an indication of the problem I want to talk about with you now, and that is the red map that we have in Australia. Governments from coast to coast, excluding Tasmania, federally and state and territories, are red. They're Labor, they're left, they're progressive. The parties seem to be red left as well. I mean, there's plenty of people on social media with the laughable claim that the Liberal Party is losing because they've lurched too far to the right.
Well, it's a dominant theory within the Liberal Party.
Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah, okay. It would seem.
While they're pursuing that thought that they've gone too far to the right and need to go further to the left, and I hope we agree the Liberal Party problem is that they've gone too far to the left. We end up going to possibly talk in circles and confuse ourselves here, but what is the future of the Liberal Party, and is there a way that they can save their own electoral fortunes? Right.
Well, look, I came back to Australia after 20 years abroad, very concerned about how far left the culture had shifted, right? I was a journalist here for 13 years. I then moved into PR. I worked for 20 years in public relations in Asia. I travelled the region. I travelled different parts of the world. I saw a lot of different things. I also lived through the fall of Hong Kong to a certain extent, right? So, I'm pretty sensitive about how fragile liberty is and freedom is. And so that's why, my politics shifted very much from probably centre-left when I was a young journalist to maybe not even centre-right anymore, maybe right, conservative, quite conservative. And that's probably happened just since I've come back from Australia, that last shift, because this place is in crisis. We are broke. The country's broke. The reality of Australia right now is that we owe more than $1.5 trillion with our state and federal debt. Our governments are not showing any financial responsibility. They're just spending like crazy, and they continue to do so. There's nobody reining that in. There's no voice to rein that in, because who would want to stand up to the public and say, ladies and gentlemen, we need to tighten our belts, like they used to say in the old days. Nobody respects that anymore. It's like, give me more money. So we have a cultural problem. The Liberal Party shifted to the left because they thought that was the only way to win. It's the worst marketing strategy in the world. But I used to think that it was because they weren't very bright that they did it. Because basically, could you imagine Pepsi saying, we're sick of being the number 2 cola in Australia, we've had enough, we're going to change our formula to be exactly like Coke. Do you think that people would stop drinking Coke and start drinking Pepsi?
No Coke drinkers are going to switch.
No, there's no differentiation, right? So that's essentially the marketing approach of the Liberal Party, or the strategic approach, political strategic approach of the Liberal Party. And it's failing. Of course it's failing. It has to fail. I thought up until the West Australian election, I went through the Queensland election and the West Australian election. When the West Australian election happened and they were annihilated, I thought, okay, they're going to learn now. And then we saw South Australia, then we saw, I think, the ACT. Now, the ACT is green. It's a little green dot in the sea of red. We mustn't ever forget that Australia has a green government. There is a territory that is green, and it's run by Greens. So, that's a phenomenon that could occur elsewhere. We have only Tasmania that's still Liberal. And federally, of course, we have a Labor government. So what do you do in that situation? Well, you've got to differentiate, for starters. You've got to say, we stand for something different. Now, it might be that the Liberal Party would lose a few elections, but you won't be completely annihilated, and you won't cease to have a reason to be, or a reason to exist. The Liberal Party is now facing an existential threat. It's not just that they're losing elections, it's that they're non-existent, right? Because there's no reason to be. If you've got a centre-left party already, we don't need another centre-left party. So even if only 20% of Australians want to vote centre-right or right, it's better that you be that party for those people, stand for something, show your values, and grow from there.
And this is why the Matt Keane New South Wales Liberals lost their election, is because they took Pepsi that Menzies created and they tried to make it taste exactly like Coke, thinking, the Labor Party in this metaphor, thinking that, well, now all the Coke drinkers will vote for us.
It's insane.
Where all the Labor voters will, because we're exactly like them on environment and gender confusion and abortion and the other things that they have demonstrably lurched left on.
Anyone who studied marketing for 5 seconds understands that that's strategically insane. Now, the reality is that within the Liberal Party, that is the dominant strategic approach. So the dominant strategic approach in the Liberal Party is, we mustn't upset the new paradigm. We must speak to the centre. Well, the centre keeps moving left, right? And the centre will keep moving left. And that's what's happened over the last 20, 30 years. By playing that game, right, it helped the Labor Party. The new Labor movement was a bit of that, right, from the other side. It was a bit of, Blair, Goss, Clinton to a certain extent. It was like, well, we'll behave a little bit like Conservatives and we'll secure the centre, right? The third way politics, right? Yeah, okay, if the climate is such that that is what people want, but we're in an environment where that's not what people want, really. You've got, it's not a bell curve of public opinion or political views anymore. It's an inverted bell curve. So you've got these two very strong extremes. You've got so the base that used to be, a small minority, 3 standard deviations from the mean, or 2 standard deviations from the mean for those people who like stats, that's a significant chunk now because it's an inverted bell curve.